We come on the air tonight with a community living in fear, a nearby dam reaching its breaking point. We're live in Minnesota with thousands hoping to avoid the worst as the Midwest is slammed with dangerous weather there. And then part of Kenya's parliament building going up in flames after violent, deadly demonstrations, who the president is blaming as his country is bracing for the dangerous days ahead. Plus, the fate of a Boston woman accused of killing her boyfriend now in the hands of a jury. The dramatic closing arguments why one side calls her a murderer and the other says she's being framed. Plus, two members of Congress in a high-stakes primaries tonight. Why one's personal behavior and the other's stand on the Israel-Hamas war could cost them their seats. And the summer of sales, folks, how the biggest names in shopping are fighting to bring you the very best deals first. The details later on in the show. Hey, everybody, I'm Yasmin Vasugan in for Hallie tonight. In Minnesota, people are watching and waiting to see if a key dam can withstand the pressure from days of torrential rain and floating debris. Officials saying it's in, quote unquote, imminent failure condition. Here is why this matters oh so much. The dam that you can see it's on the Blue Earth River. It is just a couple of miles away from a city where thousands of people live. So that dam potentially breaking, it's threatening homes, businesses, even lives. Officials giving an update today.
At 1:30 a.m., a notification was issued that the dam was overtopping. With that being said, that makes this the second largest flood ever of record at the Rapidan Dam. It's more of an environmental concern if the dam were to totally breach because of the volume of sediment that's withheld upstream of the dam. And that's more concerning just for the potential ecological impacts of the dam.
So we told you about the deadly flooding in the upper Midwest yesterday on the show. That water at historic levels, folks now returning to their homes in Minnesota, Iowa to pump water out of their neighborhoods and then dig out as well. It has gotten so bad that volunteers there in Minnesota, they're trying to prevent two main lakes from combining into one. Plus, hundreds of thousands are still in the dark there across the region. The majority of roads in one Michigan county are closed because there are so many power lines down. And then you got Chicago O'Hare, one of the country's busiest airports, a ground stop issued because of bad thunderstorms. Over 160 delays there as of just this hour. In Iowa, the president approving the request for a major disaster declaration, bringing more help to that state after the storm slammed millions there. Want to get to our team. We got meteorologist Bill Cairns with us. We want to begin, though, with Adrian Broaddus on the ground in Minnesota, if we can. Adrian, good to talk to you. Give us a sense of what you're seeing there this hour.
You probably hear the loud noise in the background. Those are crews driving away who have been here working throughout the day. Behind us, you will still see the water gushing. People have been showing up throughout the day watching, but no one is more concerned than the folks who own that home just to my right. They've had this home in their family for more than 50 years. Not only are they concerned about this home collapsing, but they're also concerned about their business. It's a store, a cafe, which they call the Dam. It's here in Blue Earth County, which is home to the Rapidan Dam behind me, which officials say could fail. But officials say they can't tell whether or not the dam will stay intact or if it will collapse completely. Here's more of what that family said to me.
Afraid of the store going.
Losing,
I mean, about the most.
The store, we know the house is gone. We know we'll never be able to go back in that house.
Anymore. We're going to have to build a new house, but let's keep the dam store. That's the main goal. But there's nothing we can do about it.
That's our livelihood.
So that was Jenny Barnes and her brother David. Her brother David still lives in that home with their 84-year-old father, and they were forced to evacuate earlier in the week. Yasmin?
How are officials there, Adrian? How are they kind of mitigating this potential disaster with so many homes in the way, businesses, and people's lives and livelihood?
You talk about mitigation. One big step is this yellow tape you see behind me. I spoke with the sheriff earlier today. There's tape up here. They walked us to this area and allowed us to set up camp right here. But there's caution tape all around, and that is to keep people away. This is a park. Now, while it looks like the surface is stable, It's not. What's happened is water that has gone around on the west side of the dam has caused this massive erosion on the shoreline. And they're not sure whether or not this portion of the surface will erode. If someone were to try to get close to take a picture and accidentally fall in, first responders will not be able to go in to rescue them. So that is part of the mitigation. And they're also working with the Army Corps of Engineers. Back to you.
All right, Adrian brought us for us. Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate it. I want to go to Bill Cairns now, because it's kind of like this domino effect, right? We've got this major flooding, this potential dam breaking. Who knows what could happen if, in fact, this thing breaks. And then you've got potentially more rain on the way, more water on the way. What could that do?
Yeah, and can we talk about the volume of water behind her? I mean, it looks like a mini Niagara Falls with how much water is rushing through that. And, you know, that just goes to show you how epic and historic this flooding was this past weekend when numerous locations had over a foot of rain. So here's what we're dealing with. We have a dying area of thunderstorms that's over Indiana and Illinois. The area with the flooding is all the way up here in northern Iowa, southern Minnesota, and there's really not much going on there at the current time. So that's good. We're just tracking these strong storms north of St. Louis, just passed over Interstate 72. But later on tonight, we do think some strong storms are going to develop near Omaha, near Sioux City, who had some of the bad flooding, in Des Moines, but not in Minnesota. It's going to be mostly south of where a lot of our major rivers are cresting today and especially into tomorrow. And here's the rainfall forecast. You'll notice little to nothing in the flood zone, but to the south of there, 4 to 5 inches. So it looks like we're going to be lucky this one. Next round of storms will be Friday.
And then we got the heat.
Yeah, this heat isn't going anywhere. It's just another day just baking in the sun. So we have roughly about 60 to 65 million people in heat advisories and warnings. And now the warnings are from Memphis, right along the Mississippi River, right along the Dallas border of Texas and also in Oklahoma. A few spots like Salt Lake City hit 100 today. Denver hit 100 today, the warmest day in two years. So it's just so widespread out there. So this is the heat index. We combine the temperature and the humidity. You just notice from St. Louis right down the Mississippi, heading towards Jackson and New Orleans. Everybody feels brutal, and probably the hottest out there right now, Corpus Christi at 110, and it will be tomorrow. Watch out, it is going to get very hot, and so obviously, you know, we expect it in areas of the south, but tomorrow, Washington, D.C., the humidity returns and the heat, 102, and tomorrow night at this time, Yasmin, we'll be talking about severe thunderstorms in the Northeast, a lot of airport problems, and possibly wind damage and power outages. That's nothing to look forward to.
By the way, likely with a lot of people traveling ahead of the July 4th holiday. Bill Cairns for us. Thank you, as always, my friend. Appreciate it. Let's head overseas if we can. Right now, huge protests in Kenya turning deadly tonight after demonstrators stormed the country's parliament over the government's plan to raise taxes. Here is the country's president earlier blaming the violence on, quote, organized criminals he says have hijacked peaceful protests.
We must isolate crime from democratic expression and separate criminals from people exercising the freedom of expression.
So let's be clear here. We have actually seen no evidence that organized crime is behind this movement. At least 5 people so far have been killed during these protests, according to the human rights group. When police opened fire into that crowd, one of the people killed reportedly a medical officer just trying to help people who were hurt. Take a look at this as well. Part of the country's parliament building up, going up in flames, I should say. The fire is set by demonstrators who are deeply unhappy with the way the government's being run there. Now there are a lot of questions about what will happen in the days ahead. Danielle Hamamdjian, who's been following all this for us, is joining us now with more on this. Danielle, if you will, give us some context on how this movement kind of started and what, in fact, they're demanding.
Well, this is a youth-led movement that's garnered a lot of attention, and it culminated today. And what they're demanding is for lawmakers to reject this deeply unpopular bill. And at this point, they want the president to resign, which, as you heard, is not happening. The scenes that we saw outside Parliament, they were trying to storm the building, trying to stop lawmakers from voting in favor of this bill. It did go ahead, and it's now going to the 3rd reading. And once that's done, it lands on the president's desk for his signature. This bill is expected to raise something like $2.7 billion in additional taxes. Wow. People are outraged. They say already the cost of living is unaffordable. Everything is unaffordable. This will only choke the economy. And so they want this bill over and done with. But as you said, 5 people confirmed dead. It could be more, but we don't know just yet. But incredible scenes outside the parliament today.
So you basically have the president and the protesters coming to a head. No one's backing down on any of this. Where do we go from here?
Well, it's hard to see how his words tonight will appease the public. I mean, he talked about a treasonous day. He defended the actions by law enforcement. And it's interesting when you consider who was in the crowd today. Among the thousands of protesters across the country, there was one very familiar face, Oma Obama, President Obama's half-sister, who was in the crowd. She was giving a live interview to CNN when she herself was tear-gassed. Take a look.
I'm here because look at what's happening. Young Kenyans are demonstrating for their rights. They're demonstrating with flags and banners. I can't even see anymore. They're being tear-gassed. They're being We shall not be
So the president defending his law enforcement, but the U.S. and the UN tonight condemning the violence and urging restraint.
Danielle Hamemdjian, thank you so much. Appreciate it. In the last couple of minutes, the founder of WikiLeaks arriving in American territory in the middle of the Pacific Ocean for a court hearing that we expect is going to lead to his freedom and the end of this years-long saga with U.S. officials. Julian Assange leaving a British prison, flying thousands of miles to appear in the U.S. District Court for the Northern Mariana Islands to accept a plea deal over charges stemming from one of the largest publications of classified information in American history. He is expected to fly to his native home of Australia afterwards. Going back to 2009, Assange used WikiLeaks to release hundreds of thousands of documents related to everything from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, detainees at Guantanamo Bay, and cables sent by State Department officials. This plea deal is expected to involve a 62-month prison sentence, which will be offset by the years Assange spent in a British jail, meaning he won't have to serve any more time inside a cell and will leave the courthouse a free man. I want to bring in Josh Lederman, who's following this all for us, with more on this. Josh, good to talk to you. The United States fighting for years to get Assange on American soil so they could actually prosecute him for this classified docs dump. Why a plea deal now?
Well, it takes two to tango, and there are probably reasons on both sides why now seemed like the right time to strike this deal. For the U.S. government, they have been trying in vain for so many years to bring him to the U.S. to see justice. And only in March, we found out that the court here in the U.K. was granting Assange a full appeal, essentially one additional chance to try to avert being extradited to the U.S. And so it was unclear how long that was going to drag out, whether it'd be successful, whether he'd even be convicted once he was brought to the U.S. And in the meantime, the Australian government was really pressuring the United States to stop prosecuting this and to essentially let him go back to his home country. And for Assange, you know, he is now pleading guilty after maintaining his innocence from the very get-go. But his wife, Stella Assange, has said that, look, at the end of the day, this is a deal in which he is getting time served. He is not going to have to serve any more time, and he's going to be a free man able to spend his remaining days, presumably, with his wife and with his two young children who he's never been able to live with ever since they were born. And so it may just be that the time had run out for this to seem like a good idea to continue, both sides deciding at this point to put it behind them.
Are we expecting him to go back to work and the work of WikiLeaks?
Yeah, it's a great question. He hasn't really said specifically, but last year he gave an interview where he said that WikiLeaks had basically had to stop publishing information, lamenting the fact that no other organizations in his view have really stepped up to fill that void. And in the statement that WikiLeaks put out today describing this deal and praising the fact that he's going to be free, WikiLeaks referred to its work in the past tense. And so I think that may be an indication that there are no major plans at this point for them to get back into the same kind of business, although certainly Assange is going to be one of the most prominent faces from now on, able to speak his mind in any venue he wants for the continued release and dissemination of information, of whistleblowing that he sees his work as journalistic. And so I would imagine that we're probably not going to see the last of Julian Assange.
Josh Lederman for us. Thank you, Josh. Right now, everybody, a jury deciding the fate of a Massachusetts woman charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter adjourned for the day after about 3 hours of deliberation so far. Karen Reed accused of hitting her police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, with her SUV outside of a friend's house after a night of drinking and leaving him to die in the snow. Her defense claims that she's being framed.
If you don't have actual evidence, just throw every single thing you can against the wall to see what sticks. Drag her through the mud and make sure you attack her character. And that's what you saw in this case.
John Maroney from our affiliate WBTS is joining us now with more and then this. John, if you will, walk us through closing arguments for both the defense and prosecution here.
Yes, I mean, the prosecution did continue to push forward its narrative that it really has throughout the course of this trial, that the evidence shows that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with her vehicle 2 years ago in a snowstorm and killed him at that point in time. They walked the jury through a timeline of events that occurred around his death, before and afterwards. They also pointed again to some of the evidence that they have collected and presented to the jury. That includes some taillight pieces from her SUV that were broken. Also have some of his DNA that is on that, according to the prosecution. Also a piece of hair that was there as well. They also had to deal with this whole issue that the defense has presented in terms of being framed, that Karen Reed is being framed. The lead investigator for the case is named Michael Proctor, State Trooper Michael Proctor, and he has been a particular target of the defense. During the course of the trial, there were some text messages that were put out there by the defense. Actually, the prosecution brought them in as well because they knew that they were very damaging. And these text messages talk a lot about Karen Reed in a negative way. They dehumanize her. These are text messages that Michael Proctor had sent to family and friends during the course of the investigation. The prosecution knows that this is really a very difficult issue for them. In fact, they dealt with it during closing arguments today by the Assistant District Attorney, Adam Lally. This is what he had to say.
The text messages from Trooper Proctor are unprofessional, they're indefensible, they're inexcusable. I submit they had no bearing whatsoever or impact whatsoever on the integrity of the entirety of the investigation that Massachusetts State Police collectively conducted into John O'Keefe's death.
So the prosecution, they've dealt with that issue and moved away from it quickly. It will be interesting to see how much of a factor those text messages are for the jury, given the fact that there is a lot of evidence as well. Yes.
3 hours of deliberations so far. How's the community feeling about this?
It's sort of a mix. I mean, there are hundreds of people who have started to show up here at the courthouse in support of Karen Reed. So those are the people that we're seeing during the course of the day. It's obviously a case that is getting tons of attention, across the country, here in Massachusetts. I think the folks who are here, they seem to think that she will be found not guilty.
John Maroney for us. Thank you, John. In the last couple of hours, guys, the judge who presided over former President Trump's New York hush money trial, lifting some of the restrictions from the gag order in that case. Mr. Trump now able to speak freely about the witnesses who testified against him and the jury that convicted him. Remember, Donald Trump was held in contempt 10 times during the trial, leading to $10,000 in fines. Want to bring in NBC legal analyst Danny Savalos, who's following this for us. It was expected he was going to partially lift this gag order when it came especially to witnesses, right? But I'm more surprised about the jury. And I think back to one of the gag orders that he was held in contempt of when he talked about the jury specifically, and he said 95% of this jury is Democrats. Essentially now he could say something like that pertaining to the jury if he wanted to.
He could. And while there is a diminished need for a gag order post-trial because the sanctity of the trial no longer needs to be protected, even the judge himself in his order recognized that he would like to continue the protections for these jurors. But his rationale was that since the appellate division had decided the gag order issue on different facts than were before the judge now, he felt that he couldn't extend those protections to the jurors. So a kind of legalistic argument, maybe a very safe, conservative type argument for a judge who doesn't want more appeals, or if he's going to make a decision on the jurors, he thinks maybe it's something an appellate court should decide. And Trump's team has already indicated they may appeal.
I want to talk about Florida, if we can, for a moment, because of the hearing yesterday, Danny, as well. So let's move south for that. A decision could come, obviously, from Judge Aileen Cannon on that, with Trump's federal classified documents case. Does it surprise you at all that Judge Cannon seemed as if she was not going to enforce a gag order here, despite the fact that the prosecution is asking for one?
Yes and no. I thought the prosecution in this case made a very strong argument for a gag order. But really, procedurally, we're not talking about a gag order. We're really talking in federal court about the Bail Reform Act. So we're really asking the court is being asked to modify Trump's conditions of release. Right. And the government made a very targeted, very specific request. They did a good job in the request. The challenge for them is that the Bail Reform Act requires, quote, the least restrictive conditions. That is sort of the overall theme of the Bail Reform Act. So the judge may be leaning towards those least restrictive conditions. It's almost like a presumption against heavy restrictions on a defendant awaiting trial. So that may ultimately be the reason that the judge leans away from what we're calling a gag order, which is really just a modification of pretrial release conditions.
Of course, we're keeping our eyes and ears on that court out of Florida. Danny Savalos, thank you. Want to go to the White House now, where President Biden's biggest promise of student loan forgiveness is at risk yet again, just months before the November election. Two federal judges blocking key parts of the president's new student loan repayment program, stopping his administration from cutting down monthly payments and canceling more debt. Want to zoom out, though, for a second and take a look at where the president's big campaign promise actually stands. So Biden hoped to forgive over $400 billion in student debt by the election. That is more than a quarter of the country's outstanding education debt balance, around $1.6 trillion. But the relief has actually fallen pretty short of that, coming up at under $200 billion. Want you to keep in mind, though, here, the president's first attempt at student loan relief was blocked by the Supreme Court. So the president has tried and tried again and seemingly failed. Want to bring in Monica Alba for us, who's been covering this for us. What does this change, Monica, for folks? And what is the White House saying about it?
Yeah, and remember, Yasmin, to your point, this is something that already had been challenged, that's been litigated repeatedly. So this was supposed to be sort of the fix to the overall blockage of the president's student loan and debt forgiveness program, which is something that he really had campaigned on as a candidate. So we're talking about this specific SAVE program, which does apply to millions of people potentially, that has now been temporarily blocked by two different courts. And they're essentially saying that the education secretary, in his rationale for why this plan should go forward, overstepped his bounds and overstepped the justification for why this should happen. And we had a preview of this recently when there were all of these different attorneys general who had challenged this as well and who tried to raise this question of essentially why should some taxpayers be footing the bill for other people's decisions to pursue costly education. But this has been something that the White House has said really has been disproportionately unfair to certain people of certain income brackets or who have certain family dynamics, and that is why these targeted programs, they wanted them to help and apply to them. So today the White House is effectively saying we're going to continue to challenge this. We're going to continue to appeal it. We know, for instance, according to the White House press secretary, that the Department of Justice specifically is going to be mounting this appeal for both of the decisions for these key provisions of the SAVE plan. And she goes on to vow that essentially the White House and the president will never stop fighting to lower monthly payments and help borrowers get out from under the burden of student debt. And they try to put this in political terms, saying no matter how Republicans try to go at this. So this is something that certainly affects a lot of people. And they know heading into the November election, they want to try to appear like they're doing everything they can on this key issue.
So let's stick with that for a moment, right? Because the president has had some major headlines when it comes to him trying to put this student debt relief into practice, right? Especially when it comes to trying to bring in young voters just months ahead of the November election. So how much is the administration and especially the campaign going to be focusing on this, and especially focusing on it to get the decision overturned?
Yeah, I think they will be highlighting this repeatedly, and it's something that really comes up in the context of when the president tries to make the case that the reason he wants to be reelected for 4 more years is because he's been working so hard to try to lower costs for Americans, even if many voters, when they are polled, say that they don't feel the effects of that in their day-to-day lives, if you're talking about groceries or you're talking about gas. But others say that really when you look at this and what has been done on student debt relief, that is something that people really would like help with. And certainly it's something that many voters, and according to this poll, feel a lot of stress about on a regular basis. So when you're talking about in the order of these things, inflation still stubbornly has meant that that is higher on the list. When you talk about access to health care, gun violence concerns, your credit card balance, student loan debt is under there, but in the ballpark of 20% or so of those people, 18 to 29-year-olds, saying again that is a source of great anxiety. So it's something that they do feel, and that the Biden campaign and reelection effort is going to try to chip away at and help with these certain programs. But they did say at the outset that they knew they were likely to face legal challenges, and it's possible there could be more, but that doesn't mean they're going to keep trying to get it back on track.
I got to tell you, anecdotally, every time I've been reporting from outside the Supreme Court, especially when there has been protests with a lot of young people, every time I speak to them, especially about the upcoming election, they always bring up student loan forgiveness, and it's something that they've really been focused on and wanting from this president throughout his term. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, especially when it comes to the election here. Monica Alba, thank you. Coming up, folks, Michael Phelps is about to testify before Congress on Olympics doping. We are just getting a preview of what he's going to tell lawmakers. Our team is scrambling to review it and bring you the very latest next. Plus, what Chinese scientists say they brought back from the far side of the moon. All right, welcome back. Why the company behind several big ice cream brands is recalling some of its products. What could be in them coming up in the 5 things. Up first, though, we are just getting a look at what swimming legend Michael Phelps is going to tell a House committee in a couple of hours when he testifies about doping by Olympic athletes. In testimony released by the committee, he plans to say in part this: I witnessed firsthand the pervasive uncertainty and suspicion surrounding doping, adding the hardest part was seeing athletes achieve seemingly impossible feats, knowing the immense effort and sacrifices required to reach those heights cleanly. He's also going to be joined by fellow swimming gold medalist Allison Schmidt. The focus of the hearing, the World Anti-Doping Agency, the body tasked with making sure athletes are not taking performance-enhancing drugs. It comes after a recent New York Times report that the agency allowed 23 Chinese swimmers to compete in Tokyo back in 2021, even after they had tested positive for banned substances. 3 of them winning gold, by the way. Ryan Noble's joining us now with more on this. Ryan, good to talk to you. So Phelps has been very outspoken for anti-doping measures for years. What more are we expecting to hear from him tonight?
Well, it's fascinating, Yasmin, because this is not the first time that Michael Phelps has testified in front of Congress. In fact, he did so back in 2017. And listen to what he told the panel back then. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess we don't have that sound, but so he told the panel back in 2017 that he can't describe how frustrating it is to watch other athletes break through performance barriers and unrealistic timeframes. And he watched how this affected his teammates, as well as even the suspicion of doping, disillusioning other clean athletes. And what he's going to say in his testimony here tonight, Yasmin, is that he doesn't feel that anything is different between 2017 and what we are now facing heading into 2024, that there's still this cloud of suspicion about potential doping from athletes, particularly from countries where they just don't have the same set of standards when it comes to athletes being clean as we do here in the United States, and specifically pointing to countries like China and Russia, who aren't as transparent about their athletes' training regimen. And he's calling on Congress to really put pressure on the World Anti-Doping Agency to enforce their own standards and not let these athletes participate or not reward them for being successful if it's proven later that they actually were violating the doping rules.
So you mentioned 2024, obviously Paris Olympics around the corner. I was watching the qualifying matches last night. What is the International Olympics Committee doing about this? How are they preparing for the 2024 Olympics?
So they've tasked the responsibility of testing all these athletes through the ITA, which is an independent testing group who is responsible for making sure that any athlete that's going to participate in the Olympics is doing so clean. This is what the ITA plans to do. These are their pre-games anti-doping program. It started back in April. From April through July 18th, they have extended ITA testing across all sports, meaning they're testing these athletes during the qualifying phase. Then, in July 18th, as the Olympics kicks off through July 26th, there will be out-of-competition testing for the athletes. So that means even before they're set to compete and even after they compete, they will still be tested to make sure they're staying clean. And then there'll be samples that are held on to until August 11th to make sure that after the fact they can be tested once again to confirm that these athletes won these medals legitimately.
And any idea that they can make sure that the athletes aren't tampering with the samples?
I mean, they promise that they have the ability and the capacity to do this, that they have a number of different standards and safeguards in place to prevent that from happening. But as I think we'll hear from Phelps and Schmidt tonight, there is a lot of concern that it's not enough. There's just so much uncertainty when it comes to this topic.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. Want to get you over to the 5 things, everybody, our team thinks that you should know about tonight. We got number 1, the CDC putting out an alert today about a higher risk of dengue fever infections here in the United States, with more than 2,000 cases reported here so far this year. And numbers are way up around the world as well. These super high temperatures we've seen are ideal for the mosquitoes that spread dengue to hatch. We got number 2, a company that produces ice cream treats for companies like Hershey's and Jenny's and Friendly's. Gotta love Friendly's. Recalling products because of possible listeria contamination. You can see some of them here, like ice cream cakes and sandwiches. So far, the FDA is saying it hasn't received any reports, though, of illnesses, thankfully. Number 3, Starbucks is launching a fruity energy drink called Iced Energy that can have up to 205 milligrams of caffeine. That's around what's in 6 cans of Coke. My gosh, it comes after Panera said it's getting rid of its caffeinated charged lemonade that was blamed for at least 2 people's deaths. Starbucks did not immediately say whether it's going to try to prevent kids from having its new energy drinks. Number 4, China's lunar probe came back to Earth today with the first samples ever from the far side of the moon. Scientists think the samples will include things like 2.5 million-year-old volcanic rock, and are hoping it's going to help them learn more about the differences between the 2 sides of the moon. Number 5, we talked about this yesterday. The 16-year-old track star we told you about came in 6th place in his Olympic trials race last night. I was watching. It means Quincy Wilson will not make the track team as an individual runner, but his Olympic dream is not over yet. He could still go on a relay team, and if he does, he'd be the youngest ever male member of the U.S. Olympic track team. It was incredible to watch last night. When we come back, the new report about how tens of millions of Black Americans are being targeted with disinformation ahead of the presidential election. We're getting into the specific threats, plus a sneaky standoff between a bobcat and a little dog. That's later on in the local. Waymo, those driverless cars now available to way more people in San Francisco. We're going to explain in a couple of minutes. Up first, though, 2 members of Congress fighting for their literal political lives tonight to avoid becoming the rare incumbents this cycle who won't even make it to the general election. First, we got Colorado Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert trying to outlive controversial behavior that's caught up with her. She faced a lot of outrage after she was caught vaping and behaving rather inappropriately at a Denver production of the musical Beetlejuice. And then in New York, Congressman Jamal Bowman, whose stance on the war in Gaza has led to huge spending by pro-Israel groups to unseat him in today's primary. Despite that, he's got the support of the party's far left flank, including Bernie Sanders and AOC, who rallied with him on Saturday. You might remember Bowman was also the guy who pulled the fire alarm in a Capitol Hill building just moments before the House was about to vote on a crucial government funding bill. He pled guilty to a misdemeanor and paid a $1,000 fine for doing that. Want to bring in NBC's Sahil Kapoor to talk more about this on Capitol Hill for us. Let's talk Congresswoman Boebert first, if we can, Sahil, who throughout her career, by the way, has been literally one of the loudest voices in the Republican caucus so far. The backlash, though, that she has faced recently has kind of, it seems, quieted her, maybe humbled her. Talk us through it.
Well, humbled maybe a little, Yasmin. She did issue an apology after she got ejected from that theater, which is the only time, having covered her for almost 4 years, that I've seen her apologize for anything. She's also taken campaigning a little bit more seriously this time around after surviving her moderately red district by only a few hundred votes in the last cycle. And she is definitely spooked, which is why she has changed districts from the moderately red 3rd district in Colorado to the relatively redder 4th district in Colorado, where a Republican has an even better shot at fending off any kind of a Democrat. So there's a special election happening for that district where another Republican named Greg Lopez is expected to win. He's favored there. And in a break for Lauren Boebert, he's not running for a full term. So if she wins her primary today, she will still be favored in that district. But the Democratic candidate trying to challenge her, John Pedora, has cut a new ad sitting in that exact same seat in that theater where she got ejected, trying to play up the fact that this is a controversial congresswoman arguing that she doesn't really take her job seriously, that she's here to create drama. Let's see if this becomes a problem for her in even that redder district this fall.
Let's talk Bowman, if we can, for a moment, too. He faced this avalanche, right, of spending against him, the most ever for a House primary. What's the outlook for him?
It's exposing a lot of fault lines in the Democratic Party, this race up in the suburbs of New York, starting with that old 2016 clash. You got Bernie Sanders on one side, campaigning with Jamal Bowman, supporting him strongly, and you got Hillary Clinton stepping in to endorse his challenger, George Latimer. It's also a referendum on whether the squad, which is now up to 9 members, the staunchly progressive members of the House Democratic Caucus, 9 members over the last 6 years, not a single one of them has ever lost a primary. A lot of them keep getting challenged in primaries. They've all hung on. They've all defeated their Democratic challengers who are running against them from the center. This would be the first defeat if Bowman goes down, and I think the conventional wisdom has moved in the direction of Bowman likely being defeated. Polls have been limited, but the polls we have seen show George Latimer with a significant lead, and that money, millions and millions of dollars, setting new records, that is a very steep hill for Bowman to climb, as even his progressive allies admit, Yasmin.
We're going to be watching these races for sure. Thank you, Sahil. Let's stick with 2024 if we can, because there is this new report out saying that tens of millions of Americans are being targeted with a ton of disinformation in online black spaces ahead of the 2024 presidential election. It highlights 3 significant threats to black voter engagement in November, including getting people to not care about voting or the election at all. President Biden's broken promises, real and, by the way, made up, and stoking divisions amongst black voters via certain influencers who knowingly and unknowingly spread disinformation, like, for instance, Candace Owens, who has millions of followers on various platforms. She said blatantly inaccurate things, like, by the way, vaccines cause a, quote, explosion of childhood cancer, and that the Uvalde shooter who killed 19 children was transgender. NBC's Marquise Francis just dropped a story on NBCnews.com for us and is joining us now with more on this. Break this all down for us, Marquise, if you can, and what more you found in this report.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. You know, disinformation is something that people talk incessantly, seemingly, about online or in person amongst their friends or whatnot. But they don't talk often about what is it and how is it impacting people. So this report out by Onyx Impact touted as the first of its kind to really understanding disinformation through online black communities. And they identified half a dozen core online networks that are reaching or targeting specifically black Americans. And they named gateway influencers and platforms, far-right activists, and media outlets, the black manosphere, black extreme nativists and separatists, health skeptics, and foreign actors. And they included a bunch of different examples, as you mentioned, Candace Owens just before, even the Fresh and Fit podcast. These are places that people go to for information, but when the information is not true and inaccurate, it has a devastating effect.
So, okay, we got this report. They've identified the issues. They've identified the misinformation and the problems. What can be done about it, and how much does Onyx actually think this is going to influence voters one way or the other come November?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in this report, they actually offer strategic guidance in which to combat this. Normally, I would think, okay, you run away, right? But they're actually saying, no, engage with these platforms. They offered actually several key ways to engage. Engaging with them not just before an election is coming up, but consistently. Also, identifying trusted messengers and discrediting bad actors, which is super important. important. And overall, aggressively countering that disinformation. I actually also spoke to the CEO, and she has something to say about that as well.
Black voters are likely less susceptible to many disinformation narratives given their deserved higher levels of skepticism in institutions and government overall. But just like other communities, when disinformation is targeted and sophisticated and comes from messengers with standing, it can be incredibly effective and dangerous.
Yeah, and so this report and its findings are hoping to inform us as Americans, as people who are actively engaging in our democracy. And one of the things that I also found in my research is the fact that Black Americans actually over-index when it comes to social media in this age where everything is put behind a paywall. Right. Oftentimes, Black Americans are getting their information from YouTube and from Facebook. And so when that information is not vetted and not actually correct, it can really have such a large impact.
So when you talk about engagement, when you talk about combating it, who's doing it? Us as citizens, all of us?
Yeah.
Black, white, brown, no matter what color, engaging in disinformation and fighting back?
Engaging and holding accountable.
Holding accountable, speaking facts.
If you listen to a platform regularly, and they don't do this all the time, but they have someone on that platform who is spewing disinformation, it's all of our responsibility to actually combat that and say, hey, that's not okay.
Speaking facts of truth.
Absolutely.
Truth to non-facts. Yes, got it. Okay, Marquise Francis, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, NBC covers hundreds of stories each day, and because it's tough to read, to watch, or to listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment that we call The Local. From our Northeast Bureau, firefighters in New York battling a bad fire that ripped through a vacant building overnight. The flames reaching up to 100 feet in the air at one point. Authorities saying 4 of the city's 6 trucks were used to getting it under control. Nobody was hurt. Investigators are still looking into what caused it. Then to our Western Bureau, Waymo, the driverless taxi company, now offering services to anyone in San Francisco. Users can call a car through the company's app, just like Uber and Lyft. Before this week, Waymo only accepted riders if they had been on the company's wait list, which had about 300,000 people on it up until today. Then from our Southern Bureau, look at this video of a standoff between a bobcat and a 10-year-old Yorkie named Boots down in Texas. There's the bobcat sneaking up behind Boots before taking a couple swipes at him. You can see them both run away once the homeowner noticed. She says she started screaming, startling the bobcat and getting Boots safely inside. All right, coming up, the Surgeon General's new warning, this time about gun violence. What we're learning from a new report on who's most affected by it. Stick with us. All right, gun violence, officially a public health crisis in America, according to the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, announcing the news today. Take a listen.
As a doctor, I've seen the consequences of firearm violence up close in the lives of the patients I've cared for over the years. These are moms and dads, sons and daughters, all of whom were robbed of their physical and mental health by senseless acts of violence.
The Surgeon General also releasing a nearly 40-page report detailing the scale of this problem, right? The magnitude of it, especially amongst young people, showing that since 2020, firearms are the leading cause of death for American youth ages 1 through 19. He's also calling on Congress to pass a ban on assault weapons and require universal background checks, along with a whole host of other policy changes as well. Dr. Natalie Azar is joining us now with more on this. I think this report was really interesting, right? Because I think there's a couple of questions out of this. First, it's what's inside of it, and then what are we supposed to do about it with this warning coming from the Surgeon General. Talk first about what you read when it came to who is most affected by gun violence and the long-term effects, right? The community surrounding, not just the family that's affected, but the friends that are affected.
Yeah.
The community.
Right. Well, Dr. Murthy was making a lot of points in this, as you can well imagine. And the point that really struck me is he says, well, obviously the people who lose their lives, we all can imagine that we are mourning them and we are thinking about them as being something that's lost. But for every person who loses their life, there are at least 1 to 2 other people in that person's world who've been traumatized by the event. So that just, you can see how that just exponentially grows the problem. Look, if you're talking about demographics, there's a slightly different demographic in terms of who's affected by homicides. For example, mostly young adults, 18 to 34 years old. Demographic, in terms of race and things like that is slightly different versus suicides, more likely to be 75 and older. But I think when we think about, certainly, again, the person who loses their life as a physical harm, but the potential consequences to people who survive a shooting are their mental well-being, their physical well-being. Certainly, people have been known to have paralysis afterwards, PTSD, the community as a whole, and not to mention the money, the monetary losses in the billions from an event like this. So the consequences are far-reaching, Yasmin.
So then it's, what do we do about it? And obviously we have heard the recommendations when it comes to legislation, right? Ban all assault weapons. We know the president is on board with that as well. It's difficult to get something like that through Congress. But as I've heard from the Surgeon General and also trauma surgeons, folks that work in the ER, doctors that work in the ER, in treating folks that are victims of mass shootings, right? And what they see. When you think about that as a physician, what do you think the public needs to start to learn about that?
Anyone who's spent any time in an emergency room, especially in an urban center, has seen the devastating effect of a firearm victim. When it comes to automatic rifles, it's like being in a war scenario. Right. It literally liquefies your internal organs. The majority of the majority of the gun violence, if you will, that most emergency room physicians see is handgun violence. But we're talking then about domestic abuse and individuals potentially with mental illness or things like that. The American Medical Association called gun violence a public health crisis in 2016. But it is absolutely important that the Surgeon General has also labeled it so. Look, we use as an analogy, in 1964, I believe, 42% of the population smoked cigarettes until the Surgeon General released smoking or sort of enacted this whole thing about smoking being a public health crisis, and now less than 12%. Exactly. Now less than 12% of the public does. So this can have an impact, perhaps, and maybe it's one more thing in the list of things that needs to happen for change to fully be enacted.
That's a fascinating number and decline as well. Dr. Natalie Azar, as always, thank you. All right, after a break, we are taking a pulse of the retail landscape and what people can expect at stores this summer. Coming up next. All right, the dates are officially set for the massive two-day shopping event known as Amazon Prime Day, coming up on July 16th and 17th. But it's not just Amazon. Rival retailers are looking to go head-to-head with Amazon. You got Walmart, Target, you got Best Buy. They're all getting a jump on Amazon with big summer sales before Prime Day, hoping to attract price-conscious consumers with very deep discounts and beat Amazon at its own game. I want to bring in Kate Rooney to talk more about this. Prime Day is only available, Kate, for Amazon Prime members. These other sales, though, they're open to everyone, right? However, it's hard to beat out Amazon Prime and how fast you could actually buy something with just the click of your computer.
That's such a good point. It is really important to note that Amazon's advantage really has been overnight shipping, fast shipping, and that's in some ways why they have been able to beat some of these competitors, at least when it comes to e-commerce. So that, of course, is their advantage. They do these yearly and semi-annual sales in some cases to drive Prime subscribers. So that's really the motive here. They want more people subscribing to that $139 per year subscription. That's one of the main motives. And then it's really normally a slow shopping period. So it's a chance for all of these companies to get rid of inventory, drive some sales. And Amazon's competitors, as you said, they're cluing into this. They're trying to really front run Amazon. So you got Walmart, Target, Best Buy, all scheduling events before Amazon. So they're trying to kind of get consumers to spend before the big Amazon dates. So you got Walmart is around July 8th, Target, same thing. So these are week-long discount events. But Prime Day really has historically been a huge success for Amazon. Last year, it was a record $12.7 billion.
Jeez.
And that surpassed a year ago, which was $11.9 billion. So
like
these
Bezos
are massive
needs more
numbers.
money.
Well, it is a big boon for Amazon shareholders in general, and it's seen as a big moment. So hard to compete there.
I got to say, I'm pretty surprised that you say summer is a slower shopping time. I feel like I shop more in the summer, but then again, I think I'm shopping all the time, it seems. Who gets the better end of the bargain here, companies or consumers?
Well, Yasmin, it's interesting you said sort of the constant shopping. I actually think in some ways that would be the downside for consumers if you're drawn in by these discounts and it's something that you don't necessarily need, but you're like, gosh, everything's on sale. So as a consumer, that's one way that you might not win. But because there is so much competition right now between those companies, they're trying to really undercut each other on prices. That means it really is an advantage for the consumer. If prices are lower, it's a good thing for consumers. But on the other side, the flip side, as we talked about, these companies, they get rid of their inventory, they drive sales. So in some ways a win-win, but be careful. You don't always need the air fryer. I'm a victim to that all the time. Just because it's on sale doesn't mean we need it.
I know, but when it is on sale, it's just so hard to pass up. You know what I mean? If it's half off, I mean, who doesn't need another air fryer? Kate Rooney, thank you.
Exactly.
Appreciate it. That wraps it up for this hour. Coverage picks up right now. We come on the air tonight with a community living in fear as a nearby dam reaches its breaking point. We're live in Minnesota with thousands hoping to avoid the worst as the Midwest is slammed with dangerous weather. And part of Kenya's parliament building going up in flames after violent, deadly demonstrations, who the president is blaming as his country is bracing for the dangerous days ahead. Plus, the fate of a Boston woman accused of killing her boyfriend now in the hands of a jury. The dramatic closing argument, why one side calls her a murderer and the other says she's being framed. Plus, the judge in former President Trump's hush money case partially lifting a gag order against him, what he's now allowed to say at Thursday's debate about witnesses and the jurors that convicted him. And we're just getting a look at swimming legend Michael Phelps' anti-doping testimony to Congress tonight, what he plans to say about keeping next month's Olympics clean. Hey, everybody, I'm Yasmin Vasugian in for Hallie. And tonight in Minnesota, people are watching and waiting to see if a key dam can withstand the pressure from days of torrential rain and floating debris. Officials saying it's in, quote, imminent failure condition. Here is why this matters so much. The dam, you can see it there on the Blue Earth River. It's just a couple of miles from a city where thousands of people live. So that dam potentially breaking. It's threatening homes. It's threatening businesses. Even lives. Officials giving an update today.
At 1:30 a.m., a notification was issued that the dam was overtopping. With that being said, that makes this the second largest flood ever of record at the Rapidan Dam. It's more of an environmental concern if the dam were to totally breach because of the volume of sediment that's withheld upstream of the dam. And that's more concerning just for the potential ecological impacts of the dam.
So we told you about the deadly flooding in the upper Midwest yesterday on the show. That water, by the way, at historic levels. Take a look at that. Folks now, they're returning to their homes in Minnesota, Iowa. They want to pump this water out and dig out as well. It is so bad that volunteers in Minnesota, they're trying to prevent two main lakes from combining into one. Plus, you got hundreds of thousands that are still in the dark across the region. The majority of the roads in one Michigan county, they're closed because there are so many power lines down. And then you got Chicago O'Hare Airport, one of the country's busiest, a ground stop issue because of bad thunderstorms. Over 170 delays there as of this hour. In Iowa, the president approving the request for a major disaster declaration, bringing more help to that state after the storm slammed millions there. I want to get to our team. Meteorologist Bill Cairns is with us. We want to begin, though, on the ground with Adrian Broadus on the ground in Minnesota for us. Break it down for us, if you will, Adrian. What do you see in this hour?
We still see that rapid rushing water behind me. It's the site people have been trying to get a picture of all day, but this caution tape is in place to keep people away. We heard from county officials earlier today telling us this is the second largest flood in this county's history. The closest town or city is Mankato. It's about an hour and a half southwest of Minneapolis. The concern here is that the Rapidan Dam could fail. And it's unclear when or if that will happen. City officials say they have no way to tell whether or not the dam will hold or if it will collapse. Earlier or overnight, there was some erosion of soil on the west embankment. And if you look over off my side, you'll see where the water is still gushing, and there's a home here. That home belongs to Jenny Barnes and her brother. It's been in their family for more than 50 years. But they're not only worried about their home falling into the river, they're worried about their family business. Listen in.
My great-grandfather started the dam store right here, and just by selling sandwiches to the gentlemen that were building the bridge. Watching everything erode was surreal.
And I do want to apologize. That wasn't Jenny in that sound you just heard. That's her good friend, Louise Henderson. She says her great-grandfather started this business back in the 1900s, and this dam is old, at least 110 years old. Meanwhile, we did speak with Jenny and her brother, and they're concerned about the business. They're unable to go in right now, but right now, all eyes are on the Rapidan Dam, which is behind me.
It's unbelievable just to see that water gushing behind you. What are officials saying as to what they will do, how they can take care of these folks if, in fact, this dam breaks?
Well, the good news is officials tell us if, in fact, the dam does break, we won't see a wall of water. So where I'm standing right now,
I believe we lost
to contain
Adrian.
the water.
All right, we got you back. Adrian brought us for us. Thank you,
guys hear
Adrian.
me?
Yeah, we got you, Adrian. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but certainly appreciate you sticking with us through that. Thank you, Adrian. Want to get to Bill Cairns now, who's standing by for us at the weather wall. I mean, it's unbelievable, Bill, to see just all the water kind of gushing behind Adrian there, and just all the water accumulation that we've seen over the last couple of days. There have been some breaks, right, throughout, but you really need some dryness, right? A real break to get back in and to figure out the damage that has been done, and then to figure out what comes next.
Yeah, and a lot depends on how fast the water is moving. Where she is, the water is quickly moving. That's very obvious. But in other spots of Iowa and southern Minnesota, the water is just kind of meandering, and it's taking its sweet old time. And that's why some rivers aren't even cresting. Minnesota River and also the Mississippi River at St. Paul, they aren't even going to crest till tomorrow or Thursday. So that's why any additional rain will get those levels even higher. So we are tracking some isolated severe storms. We've been tracking these storms heading towards St. Louis. We just have a brand new severe thunderstorm watch that's issued for areas of South Dakota and areas of northern Nebraska. These are outside of the flood zone, so that's good. So from Sioux City to Sioux Falls and then towards Mankato, which is that dot here, that underneath the storm tracker right here, that's where that dam was located. And so isolated storms. We've been tracking this one storm just outside of Des Moines that had a tornado warning on it for a little while. Now it's severe thunderstorm warning, but not a fun time on Interstate 80 just south of Newton heading towards Monroe. And as far as isolated severe storms, anywhere in yellow, so the locations we were just talking about, and then this will drop down towards Kansas City as we go throughout the overnight hours, and then towards like Springfield during the overnight. Indianapolis, I think you're in the clear. Chicago, you're in the clear also. So yes, definitely some problems with some severe storms. And of course, we've also got, the rainfall potential in the areas that had the flooding. Thankfully, nothing too heavy, maybe just a quarter to a half an inch at most. So it really shouldn't make things worse. And finally, we'll end with the heat story, which is endless, broken record. It seems like it's going to go all summer long. But I just wanted to update you and show you some of the current temperatures out there. I mentioned it hit 100 today in Denver for the first time in 2 years. Salt Lake City is close. Everyone is in the 90s right now, and that's coming to the Northeast tomorrow, so be prepared.
Wow, be prepared. Bill Cairns, thank you. Right now, everybody, we're going overseas. You got huge protests in Kenya turning deadly tonight after demonstrators stormed the country's parliament over the government's plan to, in fact, raise taxes. Here's the country's president earlier blaming the violence on, quote, organized criminals, he says, have hijacked peaceful protests.
We must isolate crime from democratic expression and separate criminals from people exercising the freedom of expression.
I want to be clear here. We have seen no evidence that organized crime is actually behind this movement. At least 5 people were killed during these protests, according to the human rights group, when police opened fire into the crowd. Part of the country's parliament building up in flames. The fire set by demonstrators who are deeply unhappy with the way that the government's being run there. We also have a video from CNN that shows President Barack Obama's half-sister, who is a Kenyan activist, being tear-gassed mid-interview.
I'm here because look at what's happening. young Kenyans who are demonstrating for their rights. They're demonstrating with flags and banners. I can't even see anymore. They're being tear gassed. They're being tear
We shall not be intimidated. It's our nation.
NBC News correspondent Danielle Hamamdin is joining us now with more on this. Give us this kind of a lay of the land here and what is happening right now on the ground in Kenya.
So as we speak tonight, the military has been deployed into the streets to help support police, law enforcement, which was defended by the president tonight, a rather defiant address to the nation by William Ruto, the president. He defended the actions of law enforcement. He called it a treasonous day, as you said, saying that that criminals had hijacked and infiltrated the peaceful protests. This is all about a finance bill that was voted, that was approved today in Parliament, a very controversial, deeply unpopular bill that would see taxes raised by about $2.7 billion. The people that you see there, what's at stake for them? The basic ability to put food on the table. That is what we're hearing over and over again. People saying they can't even buy diapers, they can't buy vaccines, and they want the president to resign, which clearly is not going to happen, certainly not after tonight's address. But the bill is going ahead. It was approved today in Parliament. It's now going to the third reading, after which it will land on the president's desk for his signature.
Any calls from the international community here that we're hearing when it comes to these ongoing protests, especially for the president to quell the protest in a nonviolent way?
The UN has weighed in. The U.S. has weighed in, saying that they're urging restraint. Just a bit of sort of context here. 80% of the population in Kenya is under the age of 35. They are going to be feeling the effects of this bill for years and years to come. And so it's hard to see how anything President Ruto said tonight is going to appease the anger we're seeing in the streets.
Danielle Hamamdin, thank you. Appreciate it. Just in the last hour or so, the founder of WikiLeaks arriving in an American territory in the middle of the Pacific Ocean for a court hearing that we expect is actually going to lead to his freedom and the end of this years-long legal saga with the U.S. officials. Julian Assange leaving a British prison, flying thousands of miles to appear in the U.S. District Court for the Northern Mariana Islands to accept a plea deal over charges stemming from one of the largest publications of classified information in American history. He was expected to fly to his native home of Australia afterwards. Let's go back, if we can, to 2009. Assange used WikiLeaks to release hundreds of thousands of documents related to everything from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, detainees at Guantanamo Bay, and cables sent by State Department officials. The plea deal is expected to involve a 62-month prison sentence, which is going to be offset by the years Assange has spent already in a British jail, meaning he's not going to have to serve any more time inside a cell and is going to leave the courthouse essentially a free man. Let's bring in NBC's Keir Simmons, who's following all of this for us. Keir, good to talk to you. Do we know why it is that U.S. officials now have decided to strike this plea deal?
Well, the Justice Department aren't saying. There is speculation that there may be a connection to the U.S. political timeline. Certainly, Australia was putting a lot of pressure on the U.S. government. And then there was the U.K. Legal system. Julian Assange, of course, was in jail in Britain as the U.S. tried to extradite him to that country. Now, as you say, this is quite stunning, frankly, because of the history of all this. Just take a look. It's back in 2010 that Julian Assange publishes those classified documents. In that same year, Sweden requests his arrest for sexual assault. He takes refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, and then we have the process where the British legal system kicks in. He finds himself in jail for 5.5 years, and then finally now the plea deal, and that plea deal looks a little like this. Assange will appear in federal court, as you say, in the Northern Mariana Islands. He will plead guilty to conspiring to obtain and disclose classified documents. Now, he's going to be sentenced for 62 months, but he's already served, as I said, 5.5 years in a UK jail. jail. So that's how we get here now, and it's making headlines around the world.
You bring up 2010, and I think it's important to note kind of just how huge it was at that moment, the release of all of these classified documents, and the justification that was made at the time by Julian Assange himself, and how it set him up on this course that we have now seen over the last really decade plus, right, 14 or so years. Is there any indication of Assange wanting to return to the work of WikiLeaks?
Well, that would be Julian Assange. I mean, you know, you should expect the unexpected with Julian Assange. Of course, though, his friends and family say he has been through an ordeal. So we shall have to see. You're right that he is a very controversial figure. He really divides people. On the one hand, there are those who say that what he got published through WikiLeaks really changed people's minds about the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. On the other hand, and many in the intelligence community, for example, will say this, he was accused of using criminal means, conspiracy, helping with a conspiracy, using criminal means to get access to US intelligence, which those people say is far beyond how a journalist would act, and therefore he didn't deserve the protections of a journalist. And this isn't about freedom of speech. I don't think those two sides will ever agree with each other, but this for now does appear to be the end of the Julian Assange story. Again, though, your question's a good one. I can't believe that we won't hear from him again.
Yeah, Kirsten.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Right now, everybody, jury deciding the fate of a Massachusetts woman charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter adjourned for the day after about 3 hours or so of deliberations. Karen Reed accused of hitting her police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, with her SUV outside of a friend's house after a night of drinking and leaving him to die in the snow. Her defense claiming she's being framed in this high-profile case.
If you don't have actual evidence, just throw every single thing you can against the wall to see what sticks. Drag her through the mud and make sure you attack her character. And that's what you saw in this case.
John Maroney from our affiliate WBTS is joining us now with more than this. John, if you will, walk us through closing arguments for both the defense and prosecution here.
Yes, I mean, the prosecution, it continued to push forward its narrative that it really has throughout the course of this trial, that the evidence shows that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with her vehicle 2 years ago in a snowstorm and killed him at that point in time. They walked the jury through a timeline of events that occurred around his death, before and afterwards. They also pointed again to some of the evidence that they have collected and presented to the jury. That includes some taillight pieces from her SUV that were broken. Also have some of his DNA that is on that, according to the prosecution. Also a piece of hair that was there as well. They also had to deal with this whole issue that the defense has presented in terms of being framed, that Karen Reed is being framed. The lead investigator for the case is named Michael Proctor, State Trooper Michael Proctor, and he has been a particular target of the defense. During the course of the trial, there were some text messages that were put out there by the defense. Actually, the prosecution brought them in as well because they knew that they were very damaging, and these text messages talk a lot about Karen Reed in a negative way. They dehumanize her. These are text messages that Michael Proctor had sent to family and friends during the course of the investigation. The prosecution knows that this is really a very difficult issue for them. In fact, they dealt with it during closing arguments today by the Assistant District Attorney, Adam Lally. This is what he had to say.
The text messages from Trooper Proctor are unprofessional, they're indefensible, they're inexcusable. I submit they had no bearing whatsoever or impact whatsoever on the integrity of the entirety of the investigation that Massachusetts State Police collectively conducted into John O'Keefe's death.
So the prosecution, they've dealt with that issue and moved away from it quickly. It will be interesting to see how much of a factor those text messages are for the jury, given the fact that there is a lot of evidence as well. Yes.
3 hours of deliberations so far. How's the community feeling about this?
It's sort of a mix. I mean, there are hundreds of people who have started to show up here at the courthouse in support of Karen Read. So those are the people that we're seeing during the course of the day. It's obviously a case that is getting tons of attention, across the country, here in Massachusetts. I think the folks who are here, they seem to think that she will be found not guilty.
John Maroney for us. Thank you, John. All right, just in the last couple of hours, the judge who presided over former President Trump's New York hush money trial lifting some of the restrictions from the gag order in that case. Donald Trump is now able to speak freely about the witnesses who testified against him and the jury that convicted him. Remember, Mr. Trump was held in contempt 10 times during this trial, leading to $10,000 in fines. I want to bring in NBC legal analyst Danny Savalos, who's following this for us. Danny, good to talk to you. The New York case, far from over. We still have sentencing, obviously, in just a couple of days or so, 10 days from now. Likely several rounds of appeals as well. The judge, though, feeling there was no longer a need for this aspect, or I should say some aspects, right, of this gag order.
That's right. So the judge is actually lifting the gag order as to members of the jury, but continuing it as to members of the prosecution team and their families. I should say he's also discontinuing it as to witnesses. So Trump is free now to speak about witnesses and jurors. But what's interesting about that is in the order itself, the judge expressed concern about lifting the order against jurors. And it appears he would, if he felt that he could have, extended it and continued to protect the jurors. As it is, he is disallowing further information about them to come out. But Donald Trump now, in theory, can complain about the jurors. And I imagine if he crosses any lines, the prosecution will be back in front of the court asking for some relief.
I want to talk about Florida if we can, because of the hearing yesterday, right? You got the federal classified documents case going down in Fort Pierce. The judge there, Eileen Cannon, appearing kind of skeptical, to say the least, of efforts to get this gag order placed on Donald Trump. The special counsel's request, it's really specifically focused, Danny, on members of law enforcement. So could we actually still see at some point a gag order applied the way that it was, for instance, in the New York case?
Special counsel in the Florida documents case, the federal case, made a very targeted, as you said, very narrow request. And their concern was Donald Trump talking specifically about FBI agents. And specifically, they had evidence of him doing so in the past, as he did about language in a search warrant that was executed, where Donald Trump said, and this is not what the warrant said, but that the FBI wanted to come in with guns and possibly hurt him, which is simply not what the boilerplate language on the warrant says. So even though the government asked for this targeted, narrow, gag order is not really what they call it in the federal system, but they asked for modification of pretrial release conditions.
Right.
There is the part of the Bail Reform Act that requires the least restrictive conditions. So if Judge Cannon denies this request, look for her to cite that magic language.
And I see your daughter right behind you looking for you to end this interview. So with that, I will. Danny Savalos, thank you for that. All right, an NBC News investigative report. U.S. officials tonight telling NBC News that more than 50 migrants with potential ties to an ISIS-affiliated smuggling network are at large in America. Many of them illegally crossed the southern border and were released into the U.S. by Border Patrol. They're just a fraction of the more than 400 immigrants from Central Asia who have been identified by ICE as, quote, subjects of concern because of potential ISIS ties. Most of them are from Central Asian countries. It's coming after 8 men from Tajikistan with potential ties to ISIS were arrested in New York, Philly, and L.A. just a couple of weeks ago. Want to bring in Julia Ainsley, who's got more on this. Talk us through the kind of connections, Julia, that these migrants have possibly with ISIS and how big of a potential threat there is.
Well, it's a pretty big revelation, Yasmin, just because we now know more about this network. This is something we only heard briefly about from the FBI director in March, where he said he was concerned about a human smuggling network that might have ISIS ties. Now we understand this is a network that has been moving migrants from that part of the world, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Georgia, Moldova, and Russia, if I just got them all. They've been moving them over the southern border, and they understand that there are some people in that group who are affiliated with ISIS. And so now ICE has decided that they want to go out and arrest those people who are in the United States on immigration charges. They're not at this point being charged with terrorism. They don't think that there's an active plot, but they think that there's enough concern simply because these people were brought here by a group linked with ISIS, that they need to at least take measures to arrest and possibly get some of these people out of the country. We understand they've deported some already. They've arrested over 150, and then to find out more about them. But of concern right now to them is that of that group of over 400, more than 50 remain at large. They don't know where they are, and ICE wants to arrest them if they can find them, Yasmin.
So all of this, by the way, happening under the guise, or I should say, ahead of the presidential election. We know, obviously, immigration top of mind, the former president running for re-election, really kind of trying to capitalize on what he sees as a major immigration problem in this country.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is obviously coming just 2 days before the debate. You could see how the former president might try to overblow something like this by saying this is all because of what's happening under Joe Biden's watch. But the thing that Trump would have to contend with that's really changed at the border if he's elected again is how this has become so global. The majority of the migrants who crossed the border under the Trump administration were from Central America and Mexico. Now you have a huge number of migrants coming from countries in the Eastern Hemisphere that don't have the same law enforcement relationships with the United States. And so for the case of these over 400 migrants, when they crossed, Border Patrol released them because they weren't on the terror watch list. They didn't have any information that would tie them to an ISIS-linked human smuggling group. And so now it is on ICE to go out and find these people and arrest them again. Again, not because they pose a threat, but because that is the tool at their disposal to take care of anyone who might have a link to ISIS. And that's something that a Trump administration would have to contend with in their second term that they didn't have to face in their first term.
Julie Ainsley, thank you. Let's head to the White House, where President Biden's biggest promise of student loan forgiveness is at risk yet again, just months before the November election. 2 federal judges blocking key parts of the president's new student loan repayment program, stopping his administration from cutting down monthly payments and canceling more debt. Want to zoom out, though, for a second and take a look at where the president's big campaign promise actually stands. So Biden hoped to forgive over $400 billion in student debt by the election. That is more than a quarter of the country's outstanding education debt balance, around $1.6 trillion. The relief, though, has actually fallen pretty short of that number, coming in at under $200 billion. But keep in mind here, the president's first attempt at student loan relief was blocked by the Supreme Court. So the president has tried and tried and tried again and seemingly failed. Monica Alba joining me now. What is this change, Monica, for folks? And what is the White House saying about it?
Yeah, and remember, Yasmin, to your point, this is something that already had been challenged, that's been litigated repeatedly. So this was supposed to be sort of the fix to the overall blockage of the president's student loan and debt forgiveness program, which is something that he really had campaigned on as a candidate. So we're talking about this specific SAVE program, which does apply to millions of people potentially, that has now been temporarily blocked by 2 different courts. And they're essentially saying that the education secretary, in his rationale for why this plan should go forward, overstepped his bounds and overstepped the justification for why this should happen. And we had a preview of this recently when there were all of these different attorneys general who had challenged this as well and who tried to raise this question of essentially why should some taxpayers be footing the bill for other people's decisions to pursue costly education. But this has been something that the White House has said really has been disproportionately unfair to certain people of certain income brackets or who have certain family dynamics, and that is why these targeted programs, they wanted them to help and apply to them. So today the White House is effectively saying we're going to continue to challenge this. We're going to continue to appeal it. We know, for instance, according to the White House press secretary, that the Department of Justice specifically is going to be mounting this appeal for both of the decisions for these key provisions of the SAVE plan. And she goes on to vow that essentially the White House and the president will never stop fighting to lower monthly payments and help borrowers get out from under the burden of student debt. And they try to put this in political terms, saying no matter how Republicans try to go at this. So this is something that certainly affects a lot of people. And they know heading into the November election, they want to try to appear like they're doing everything they can on this key issue.
So let's stick with that for a moment, right? Because the president has had some major headlines when it comes to him trying to put this student debt relief into practice, right? Especially when it comes to trying to bring in young voters just months ahead of the November election. So how much is the administration and especially the campaign going to be focusing on this and especially focusing on it to get the decision overturned.
Yeah, I think they will be highlighting this repeatedly, and it's something that really comes up in the context of when the president tries to make the case that the reason he wants to be reelected for 4 more years is because he's been working so hard to try to lower costs for Americans, even if many voters, when they are polled, say that they don't feel the effects of that in their day-to-day lives, if you're talking about groceries or you're talking about gas. But others say that really when you look at this and what has been done on student debt relief, that is something that people really would like help with. And certainly it's something that many voters, and according to this poll, feel a lot of stress about on a regular basis. So when you're talking about in the order of these things, inflation still stubbornly has meant that is higher on the list when you talk about access to health care, gun violence concerns, your credit card balance. Student loan debt is under there, but in the ballpark of 20% or so of those people, 18 to 29-year-olds, saying again that is a source of great anxiety. So it's something that they do feel and that the Biden campaign and reelection effort is going to try to chip away at and help with these certain programs. But they did say at the outset that they knew they were likely to face legal challenges, and it's possible there could be more, but that doesn't mean they're going to keep trying to get it back on track.
I got to tell you, anecdotally, every time I've been reporting from outside the Supreme Court, especially when there has been protests with a lot of young people, every time I speak to them, especially about the upcoming election, they always bring up student loan forgiveness, and it's something that they've really been focused on and wanting from this president throughout his term. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, especially when it comes to the election here. Monica Alba, thank you. Coming up, the major world first in Finland, how the country says it'll now respond to the rise in bird flu cases, plus why Tesla is recalling its Cybertruck for the 4th time. Welcome back. We are just getting a look at what swimming legend Michael Phelps is going to tell a House committee less than an hour from now when he testifies about doping by Olympic athletes. In testimony released by the committee, he plans to say in part this: I witnessed firsthand the pervasive uncertainty and suspicion surrounding doping, adding, the hardest part was seeing athletes achieve seemingly impossible feats, knowing the immense effort and sacrifices required to reach those heights cleanly. He's also going to be joined by fellow swimming gold medalist Allison Schmidt. The focus of the hearing, the World Anti-Doping Agency, the body tasked with making sure athletes are not taking performance-enhancing drugs. It's coming after a recent New York Times report that the agency allowed 23 Chinese swimmers to compete in Tokyo back in 2021, even after they had tested positive for banned substances. 3 of them, by the way, won gold. Ryan Nobles has been following this for us and joining us now from Capitol Hill. Phelps has been really, Ryan, outspoken about anti-doping measures for years now. What more are we expecting to hear from him tonight?
Yeah, Yasmin, one of the reasons that he has been so outspoken about this is because he knows how hard it is to get to the Olympics, to achieve those big goals that these athletes have, to succeed in those goals, and then, in many cases, be eclipsed by athletes who are not playing by the same set of rules, particularly in countries that don't have the same standards that the United States and other countries do when it comes to doping. And Phelps just believes that the World Anti-Doping Agency isn't doing enough to enforce these standards across the entire Olympic playing field. And this isn't the first time he talked about this. In fact, he testified before Congress back in 2017, pleading with Congress to lean on the anti-doping agency to do more. And he's back again tonight to say that he just feels like nothing has changed. This is what he's going to say in his opening statement. He's going to say, sitting here once again, it is clear to me that any attempts of reform at the World Anti-Doping Agency have fallen short. I urge Congress to use its considerable leverage with WADA to make the organization independent and effective. Of course, the United States, among many countries that helps to financially support the World Anti-Doping Agency as part of its efforts to help international sports remain clean and competitive. And so what Michael Phelps is asking for tonight is for Congress to do even more to use the power of the purse to convince this organization to get its act together.
So we're about 4 weeks out from the Olympics. Obviously, China's going to be there. Russia has been accused of doping as well during the Olympics. What is the IOC saying? How are they preparing to make sure that athletes are not doping?
So they've tasked this group called ITA, which is an international testing agency with the responsibility of testing these athletes as they go through the Olympic process. And the ITA has put out a very transparent example of how they plan to make sure that these athletes are adhering to the rules. It began with testing way back in April. That's when they began this process of testing athletes in the early stages of these competitions through their trial period to get to the Olympics. They're also going to test the athletes starting July 18th when the Olympics starts, even when they're not necessarily preparing for competition. They'll be out of competition testing and in competition testing during the games. And then they're going to keep the samples from every athlete until August 11th, where they'll be then tested again after the fact to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. They believe that this is enough to make sure that the playing field is even. But obviously, there are a lot of athletes, Phelps included, who tonight are going to tell Congress they're just concerned that it's not enough. And the people that are going to be damaged the most by it are by the athletes that are playing by the rules. Yasmin.
Ryan Nobles, thanks for being on this for us. Appreciate it, my friend. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks that you should know about tonight. Number 1, the CDC putting out an alert today about a higher risk of dengue fever infections here in the United States, with more than 2,000 cases reported here so far this year. And numbers are way up around the world as well. These super high temperatures we've seen are ideal for mosquitoes that spread dengue to hatch. Number 2, Tesla just recalled its Cybertruck again, and it's actually 2 new recalls. One's about windshield wipers, the other's about loose trim that can fall off. Each one affects more than 11,000 trucks. This means Tesla's now recalled the Cybertrucks 4 times since they went on sale in November. Tesla says it'll let owners know and replace or rework the parts. Number 3, Starbucks is launching a fruity energy drink called Iced Energy. It can have up to 205 milligrams of caffeine. That's around what's in 6 cans of Coke. It's coming after Panera said it's getting rid of its caffeinated charged lemonade. That was blamed for at least 2 people's deaths. Starbucks did not immediately say whether it's going to try to prevent kids from having its new energy drinks. Number 4, TSA saying the top 5 busiest travel days ever were in just the last 4.5 weeks, and it broke the record for the most people screened on a single day. This past Sunday, at nearly 3 million people. But that record might get broken again really, really soon, because this Friday, it's expected to screen more than 3 million people as people travel ahead on the 4th of July holiday. And then we got number 5, all eyes on this guy. The 16-year-old track star we told you about yesterday came in 6th place in his Olympic trials. But do not fret. It means Quincy Wilson will not make the track team as an individual runner, but his Olympic dream is not totally over. He could still go on a relay team, and if he does, he would be the youngest ever male member of the U.S. Olympic track team. When we come back, a new report saying tens of millions of Americans are being targeted with disinformation ahead of the 2024 election. What it says are the biggest threats, plus the historic ruling in Israel, who the country's Supreme Court says must now serve in the military. All right, welcome back. NBC covers hundreds of international stories every single day. And because it is tough to read, to watch, or to listen to all of them, our teams around the globe have done it for you. Here's a look at what they're watching in a segment that we call The Global. So from Israel, the Supreme Court ruling that ultra-Orthodox Jewish men have to be drafted into the military, a huge change, because for decades they were allowed to pursue religious studies full-time instead of military service. It's also a blow, by the way, to Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, whose governing coalition includes ultra-Orthodox parties who have said they may quit the government if the rules change. Over to Finland. Health officials there planning to roll out bird flu vaccines as soon as next week to some workers who are exposed to animals. Finland would be the first country in the world to take action like this. Remember, at least 3 U.S. dairy workers recently infected. No human cases in Finland yet, though. And then from Spain, a new species captured on video for the first time. It kind of looks like a spider, but it is actually a different type of creature. It's an arachnid that's super hard to capture because they're much smaller and faster than others like it. Biologists say it's the first of its kind found there in like 200 years. All right, over to 2024, because there is a new report out tonight saying that tens of millions of Americans are being targeted with a ton of disinformation in online black spaces ahead of the 2024 presidential election. It highlights 3 significant threats to black voter engagement in November, including getting people to not care about voting or the election, President Biden's broken promises real and made up, and stoking divisions amongst black voters via certain influencers who are knowingly and unknowingly spreading disinformation, like Candace Owens, who has millions of followers on various platforms. She said blatantly inaccurate things like vaccines cause a, quote, explosion of childhood cancer, and that the Uvalde shooter who killed 19 children was, in fact, transgender. NBC's Marquise Francis just dropped a story on NBCNews.com and joins me now. Break this all down for us, Marquise, if you can, and what more you found in this report.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. You know, disinformation is something that people talk incessantly, seemingly, about online or in person amongst their friends or whatnot. But they don't talk often about what is it and how is it impacting people. So this report out by Onyx Impact touted as the first of its kind to really understanding disinformation through online black communities. And they identified half a dozen core online networks that are reaching or targeting specifically black Americans. And they named gateway influencers and platforms, far-right activists, and media outlets, the black manosphere, black extreme nativists and separatists, health skeptics, and foreign actors. And they included a bunch of different examples, as you mentioned, Candace Owens just before, even the Fresh and Fit podcast. These are places that people go to for information, but when the information is not true and inaccurate, it has a devastating effect.
So, okay, we got this report. They've identified the issues. They've identified the misinformation and the problems. What can be done about it, and how much does Onyx actually think this is going to influence voters one way or the other come November?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in this report, they actually offer strategic guidance in which to combat this. Normally, I would think, okay, you run away, right? But they're actually saying, no, engage with these platforms. They offered actually several key ways to engage, engaging with them not just before an election is coming up, but consistently. Also, identifying trusted messengers and discrediting bad actors, which is super important. And overall, aggressively countering that disinformation. I actually also spoke to the CEO, and she has something to say about that as well.
Black voters are likely less susceptible to many disinformation narratives, given their deserved higher levels of skepticism in institutions and government overall. But just like other communities, when disinformation is targeted and sophisticated and comes from messengers with standing, it can be incredibly effective and dangerous.
Yeah, and so this report and its findings are hoping to inform us as Americans, as people who are actively engaging in our democracy. And one of the things that I also found in my research is the fact that black Americans actually over-index when it comes to social media in this age where everything is put behind a paywall. Right. Oftentimes, black Americans are getting their information from YouTube and from Facebook. And so when that information is not vetted and not actually correct, it can really have such a large impact.
So when you talk about engagement, when you talk about combating it, who's doing it? Us as citizens, all of us?
Yeah.
Black, white, brown, no matter what color, engaging in disinformation and fighting back?
Engaging and holding accountable.
Holding accountable, speaking facts.
If you listen to a platform regularly, and they don't do this all the time, but they have someone on that platform who is spewing disinformation, it's all of our responsibility to actually combat that and say, hey, that's not okay.
Speaking facts to truth.
Absolutely.
Truth to non-facts. Yes, got it. Okay. Marquise Francis, thank you so much. All right, coming up, the Surgeon General's new warning, this time about gun violence. What we're learning from a new report on who's most affected by it. Stick with us. All right, gun violence, officially a public health crisis in America, according to the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, announcing the news today. Take a listen.
As a doctor, I've seen the consequences of firearm violence up close in the lives of the patients I've cared for over the years. These are moms and dads, sons and daughters, all of whom were robbed of their physical and mental health by senseless acts of violence.
The Surgeon General also releasing a nearly 40-page report detailing the scale of this problem, right? The magnitude of it, especially amongst young people, showing that since 2020, firearms are the leading cause of death for American youth ages 1 through 19. He's also calling on Congress to pass a ban on assault weapons and require universal background checks, along with a whole host of other policy changes as well. Dr. Natalie Azar is joining us now with more on this. I think this report was really interesting, right? Because I think there's a couple of questions out of this. First, it's what's inside of it, and then what are we supposed to do about it with this warning coming from the Surgeon General. Talk first about what you read when it came to who is most affected by gun violence and the long-term effects, right? The community surrounding, not just the family that's affected, but the friends that are affected.
Yeah.
The community.
Right. Well, Dr. Murthy was making a lot of points in this, as you can well imagine. And the point that really struck me is he says, well, obviously the people who lose their lives, we all can imagine that we are mourning them and we are thinking about them as being something that's lost. But for every person who loses their life, there are at least 1 to 2 other people in that person's world who've been traumatized by the event. So that just, you can see how that just exponentially grows the problem. Look, if you're talking about demographics, there's a slightly different demographic in terms of who's affected by homicides. For example, mostly young adults, 18 to 34 years old. Demographic, in terms of race and things like that is slightly different versus suicides, more likely to be 75 and older. But I think when we think about, certainly, again, the person who loses their life as a physical harm, but the potential consequences to people who survive a shooting are their mental well-being, their physical well-being. Certainly, people have been known to have paralysis afterwards, PTSD, the community as a whole, and not to mention the money, the monetary losses in the billions from an event like this. So the consequences are far-reaching, Yasmin.
So then it's, what do we do about it? And obviously we have heard the recommendations when it comes to legislation, right? Ban all assault weapons. We know the president is on board with that as well. It's difficult to get something like that through Congress. But as I've heard from the Surgeon General and also trauma surgeons, folks that work in the ER, doctors that work in the ER, in treating folks that are victims of mass shootings, right? And what they see. When you think about that as a physician, what do you think the public needs to start to learn about that?
Anyone who's spent any time in an emergency room, especially in an urban center, has seen the devastating effect of a firearm victim. When it comes to automatic rifles, it's like being in a war scenario. Right. It literally liquefies your internal organs. The majority of the majority of the gun violence, if you will, that most emergency room physicians see is handgun violence. But we're talking then about domestic abuse and individuals potentially with mental illness or things like that. The American Medical Association called gun violence a public health crisis in 2016. But it is absolutely important that the Surgeon General has also labeled it so. Look, we use as an analogy, in 1964, I believe, 42% of the population smoked cigarettes until the Surgeon General released smoking or sort of enacted this whole thing about smoking being a public health crisis, and now less than 12%. Exactly. Now less than 12% of the public does. So this can have an impact, perhaps, and maybe it's one more thing in the list of things that needs to happen for change to fully be enacted.
That's a fascinating number and decline as well. Dr. Natalie Azar, as always, thank you. All right, after a break, we are taking a pulse of the retail landscape and what people can expect at stores this summer. Coming up next. All right, the dates are officially set for the massive two-day shopping event known as Amazon Prime Day, coming up on July 16th and 17th. But it's not just Amazon. Rival retailers are looking to go head-to-head with Amazon. You got Walmart, Target, you got Best Buy. They're all getting a jump on Amazon with big summer sales before Prime Day, hoping to attract price-conscious consumers with very deep discounts and beat Amazon at its own game. I want to bring in Kate Rooney to talk more about this. Prime Day is only available, Kate, for Amazon Prime members. These other sales, though, they're open to everyone, right? However, it's hard to beat out Amazon Prime and how fast you could actually buy something with just the click of your computer.
That's such a good point. It is really important to note that Amazon's advantage really has been overnight shipping, fast shipping, and that's in some ways why they have been able to beat some of these competitors, at least when it comes to e-commerce. So that, of course, is their advantage. They do these yearly and semi-annual sales in some cases to drive Prime subscribers. So that's really the motive here. They want more people subscribing to that $139 per year subscription. That's one of the main motives. And then it's really normally a slow shopping period. So it's a chance for all of these companies to get rid of inventory, drive some sales. And Amazon's competitors, as you said, they're cluing into this. They're trying to really front run Amazon. So you got Walmart, Target, Best Buy, all scheduling events before Amazon. So they're trying to kind of get consumers to spend before the big Amazon dates. So you got Walmart is around July 8th, Target, same thing. So these are week-long discount events. But Prime Day really has historically been a huge success for Amazon. Last year, it was a record $12.7 billion.
Jeez.
And that surpassed a year ago, which was $11.9 billion. So
like
these
Bezos needs more
numbers. Well, it is a big boon for Amazon shareholders in general, and it's seen as a big moment. So hard to compete there.
I got to say, I'm pretty surprised that you say summer is a slower shopping time. I feel like I shop more in the summer, but then again, I think I'm shopping all the time, it seems. Who gets the better end of the bargain here, companies or consumers?
Well, Yasmin, it's interesting you said the constant shopping. I actually think in some ways that would be the downside for consumers if you're drawn in by these discounts and it's something that you don't necessarily need, but you're like, gosh, everything's on sale. So as a consumer, that's one way that you might not win. But because there is so much competition right now between those companies, they're trying to really undercut each other on prices. That means it really is an advantage for the consumer. If prices are lower, it's a good thing for consumers. But on the other side, a flip side, as we talked about, these companies, they get rid of their inventory, they drive sales. So in some ways a win-win, but be careful. You don't always need the air fryer. I'm a victim to that all the time. Just because it's on sale doesn't mean we need it.
I know, but when it is on sale, it's just so hard to pass up. You know what I mean? If it's half off, I mean, who doesn't need another air fryer? Kate Rooney, thank you.
Exactly.
Appreciate it. That wraps it up for this hour. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.